I grew up in South Texas. We were hunters. I used to hunt. I've killed things for recreation before, and it was the norm, right?
Hi, I'm Rodney.
I'm Alexis,
And
and
this
this
is
is
the
the
Vegan
Vegan
Agenda.
Agenda. In response to the Why I Am No Longer Vegan videos that have been trending, we've decided to make a collection of interviews with everyday vegans who have made an ethical connection and have chosen not to use animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose.
Veganism is not just a diet, it's a lifestyle based on an intention to minimize the suffering and exploitation of animals.
If you find this video informative, interesting, enjoyable, or helpful, please like, subscribe, and share.
My name is Taylor Young, and I live here in Austin, Texas. I started going plant-based at the end of 2010, so about 9 years ago, and transitioned into being fully vegan there in the next year. It was gradual. So I first started doing plant-based for my health. I grew up with terrible health issues, primarily in my gut, which I later found out was responsible for a lot of the mental issues that I had growing up. And I had bad acne. I was always feeling bad, and so finally, when I was in my early 20s, I decided to look at my diet. Medicines had never worked. Nothing that medical interventions had never worked. So I started cutting things out of my diet, the things I ate most, to see if anything would make a difference. And sure enough, one of the first things I cut was what I ate every day and every meal, which was meat, and immediately started feeling better. I was able to, process and pass food for the first time on a regular basis in my whole life. I felt more energized, and so I did that for a few months, and then I decided, well, maybe let's try cheese because that's something else. Dairy was a big part of my life growing up in South Texas. I cut out dairy as well, and again, just a huge improvement on the way I felt. My skin cleared up, all sorts of things. So
Looks great.
yeah, and I had terrible acne growing up. I have a problem with cysts. My body would develop, a sebaceous cyst all over, and I've come to find out since that keeping an acidic environment inside your body is usually to blame for all sorts of the ailments that I had, including the topical ailments. So from there, I was primarily plant-based there for a little while, and then it didn't take long for my brain, I feel like, to kind of shift from how I'd used to see the world into what it was now. I really feel like the chemical changes within my body really helped my brain to see the world differently, and I realized that there's so many other ways that I was exploiting day to day, creatures that I was just totally not conscious of before, the things I wear, my lifestyle patterns, and so it took probably about a year or two before I was fully vegan. I still owned leather goods. Didn't have the money to replace a lot of that stuff, so it took me a little while to phase that stuff out. But I stopped purchasing, so it took probably about 2 years before I was fully vegan. And then since then, a few years after that is when I became more of an activist, as trying to put the message out there to help other people transition if they want to, help the people that I thought might want what I was looking for before I was vegan, which is just open your eyes, see how your lifestyle affects others, because it's so easy to be blind to it, and follow the mainstream. It really was a suggestion from a family member of mine, to try to limit the amount of acidic stuff that I ate. That was the first thing, and it wasn't necessarily meat and cheese. It was that, as well as breads and other complex carbohydrates. But I didn't eat a lot of that stuff. It was primarily meat and cheese I ate every day. So it was a suggestion just from a family member, and I needed anything to help at the time. I just felt terrible, and I wasn't able to digest food properly, and I was working long hours, so I was stressed out, and I was getting really sick often. So it's helpful suggestion, which is why I've since tried to be that voice for other people, as well. Just give suggestions and hear what people have to say, and try to help them understand how their lifestyle might actually be responsible, and they don't need interventions. They might just need to change habits, and it's I hope every day that helps somebody. So things that helped me transition to being what I would consider vegan as opposed to just plant-based, were a few very key moments. I was introduced to Gary Yourofsky's "The Best Speech You'll Ever Hear," and I listened to that right after I had seen Earthlings for the first time. and it happened within the same month. And it was at that moment that something shifted within my consciousness, and they were both so very well done and so very well targeted that I knew at that moment I could never go back. And so at that, I felt instantly connected to the suffering that was out there, as opposed, so I stepped outside of myself to see now how I was changing. And then the same family member that suggested that I might change my diet gave me a copy of the China study. I was really concerned because there is some cancer that runs in my family, and that helped me to understand that it's primarily lifestyles running within families that causes things, and it's not a genetic issue. Because I had a lot of anxiety about it. I have family members who have died of cancers and had strokes and coronary issues. So the Dr. Campbell's that wrote the China study, very well done, very well researched, and it's an amazing piece of work. It also helped me open my eyes to lobby groups, right? They do a lot of discussion about how private interest groups really inform our choices, even behind the scenes, pushing products, and how that alone should open your eyes to tell you that it's probably not something that you need if you're being sold to it all the time. And so those kind of political shifts matched up with what I was wanting to do with the rest of my life after seeing documentaries like Earthlings, and then once they started slowly coming out with other documentaries like Forks Over Knives and some of those things, and hitting at the same time that like Netflix was coming up, and it became so attainable and easy to watch. And so reinforced, growing up in Texas and being a big meat-eating culture, it's hard to be in the counterculture, especially with diet. And so as those things started to become mainstream, and I could have a book to hand to somebody like the China study, and have some really tangible examples where it wasn't maybe me suggesting it, but showing somebody else a way that they could find that information on their own. That all helped me to transition. And like I said, it was my transition into being sort of an activist in that sense, and putting the word out that helped me solidify who I was at the time, and I've never looked back. Vegan to me is it's radical nonviolence is the way I see it, and it's extreme compassion. And those two things together, if you inform all of your choices with those two mindsets, I feel like you are going to come out with a result that it encompasses vegan. It means something different to lots of people. I put a very firm distinction between plant-based and vegan. One's a diet, one's a lifestyle, and one informs how you eat, the other one informs how you live. And so vegan to me is living by causing the least amount of harm, that radical nonviolence towards yourself, towards other beings, especially innocent beings, and to the earth, right? Radical nonviolence to our environment. Those sorts of things that are really easy to overlook when you're tuned into mainstream society. It's a very violent existence, and so practicing extreme compassion, rather than being in the societal norm, is what's essential to being vegan to me. I grew up in South Texas. We were hunters. I used to hunt. I've killed things for recreation before, and it was the norm, right? Nothing vegan to me at that point was, I would think back to granola people, right? It was vegan to me. I wasn't opposed to it. I didn't think it was freakish or anything of the sort, but it was something that people who lived on communes did. It was something that was just so foreign to me. I didn't understand it. But again, I thought it was very much strictly just diet related. I didn't understand all the other aspects to it, but I couldn't understand it, so I didn't think much of it because it was so much different than what I was used to doing and the way that I lived my life, that I don't think I thought much of it at all. It's just what different people did, people I didn't interact with on a daily basis. In the mornings, I typically will try to kind of do intermittent fasting during the day. So I don't eat breakfast typically until about 10 or 11, and it's lots of fruit, apples, pears, berries, that sort of thing. Sometimes I'll bring some oats into it, and maybe some peanut butter, something like that, depending on how hungry I am. For lunch, I'll typically have. A lot of times it's I bring leftovers with me to work, but on a day that I'm not having to go to work, we'll make some tacos, right? Something with some beans and quinoa and legumes, avocado, that kind of thing. Just something kind of light. And then for dinner, we'll cook. We love to try to cook what we used to love to eat, but in a vegan version. So my wife's a very good cook. She grew up in an Italian family, so we do lots of pastas and lasagnas and that kind of thing using quinoa pastas and garbanzo bean pastas. We do lots of legumes, lots of rice and quinoa. We've been experimenting with lots of different types of food lately, so Thai foods and curries and stuff like that. So we really like to experiment. But the basis of everything is there's always lots of veggies and mushrooms and kale and spinach and everything, bell peppers. Try to have a salad once a day to get the raw in there as well and make the gut happy. But
really
yeah, we try. It's the way I see food is it's one of the easiest ways to help myself live how I want to live, which is without pain personally, without pain around me, as well as live as long as I choose to. It's a simple thing to do to give yourself the best chance at the kind of life that you want. So it's I think that it's really easy to do what most people do, which is to eat based upon taste. But what I've told myself as I was transitioning to vegan, and the same thing I tell people now is that's not what food's for, right? We develop taste buds to identify foods in the environment back before we had choices. Now that we have choice, we need to remember that food's for nourishment. It's not for taste, right? So we need to step outside of our our senses. And as somebody told me one time, to have fidelity to reason, right? Like always remember the point in doing something, and the point in eating food is to nourish your body as opposed to just having some sort of sensation that you like. It tastes good, or it was enjoyable. I had friends. Like those things are nice, but the first thing should always be to take care of yourself, and food is the easiest way to do that. In fact, I've found that plant proteins absorb flavor, I think, much better than animal proteins ever did. The ability for tofus and things like that to soak up flavorings and seasonings is it's much greater than I ever had with meat. And in fact, I feel like meat, the flavor is so specific that it took away with seasonings. So it's in fact the opposite. I think that there's so much out there and that's one of the frustrating things. There's so much out there that you can do, and so much wonderful things you can eat that I feel like it's a no-brainer. I feel like it's so delicious. And so me and my wife try to make dishes. I bring them to work, and we bring them to family dinners to say, try it out, see how it is. And people always love them. They just can't wrap their mind around the lifestyle change that it would have to be to eat that way on a regular basis.
Is your wife vegan?
She is, yes. We transitioned together, actually. We finally had a kid. He's 18 months old as of yesterday, so we have a little toddler, which is why she's not here with me. Absolutely, yeah. We're raising him vegan. He's I think children are naturally vegan. It was one of the parts of Gary Yourofsky's speech that really spoke to me was when he points out how we all start out as vegan, and we have to learn the behaviors that are so problematic to ourselves and so violent to ourselves and to the world. And it was eye-opening. And so we, he doesn't know what harm is, just like any child does. And he's thriving. He's healthy. He's huge. Like he's a big, strong boy. And he's glowing, and he loves it. He's a happy kid. So we're gonna keep feeding him vegan until he's old enough to make his own choices. And hopefully we've helped him to understand why it's important to keep it up. But I definitely prescribe to it. I actually work at a public school. It's what I do. I run operations at a public school, and it's a school where I actually am in charge of the bringing in the lunch program. It's a small school, so we have it catered out. We don't cook it on campus. And one of the things I've done is bring in vegan options. But I also know that it's uncontrollable what you're exposed to and from your friends and that sort of thing. So it's something that we're still trying to figure out. Thankfully, my wife's an educator. She's staying at home with him, and we're going to continue that as long as we can and just be poor. It's more important for him that way to have her at home, so that she can help him understand the kind of lifestyle that we live and what we're wanting him to also do. But eventually, he is going to go out in the world, and we don't know how we're going to handle it now. We just hope that he hears us and he understands. We have animals in the house, and we're going to continue to have animals around and hope that he understands the link between what he's seeing and then what's on other people's plates. I think honesty is important. I don't think that any child is too stupid or dumb to understand what violence is in the world. And I think that if we talk about it in the right, appropriate way, that it's not going to be an issue. And I think that hopefully it's not going to be too long before he's able to understand why we don't eat what everybody else eats, and why we're different than the rest of our families. We're both the only vegan people in our families, our direct families. So it's an exposure, and so we have a chance to talk about it at those points, and we hope it sticks. But we're terrified of the outside world. We're cultivating different social groups now that we can interact with children his age, a little bit older, like-minded people, live similar lifestyles, so that we can have he can identify with everybody else and not feel as ostracized as we felt the past 10 years before veganism really started taking off. And you feel alone, and you limit your social interactions, because you don't want to go to a place where people are eating steak and that sort of thing, So it's been a struggle for us, and we're hoping that by cultivating a social group now with like-minded people, that it won't be so strange and it's just going to be normal. We haven't in a while. The last couple of times we've dined out have been bringing non-vegans to places that have mostly vegan food, if not all vegan food. We actually don't eat out that often because there are not many restaurants in Austin that are fully vegan, and I like to use my money to support, my little bit of money I have to support my lifestyle. And even if a place has vegan options, I know that the money I'm giving them is going to go into doing things that I don't agree with, helping them purchase and participate in a culture of death and murder and suffering. So we typically will instead save our money and spend it on as much organic food as we can in the grocery store, and just cook ourselves, which is cheaper, better, and easier anyway. Yeah, we don't go out to eat very often, especially with non-vegans, because it's just too hard to sit there and watch somebody putting things into their body that came from a place of suffering, but also that's hurting them. And the same thing, we don't do as many family events anymore either, because it's so hard to watch my family who has health issues and are overweight eating things that are hurting them, and it's helpful. And they don't like to listen to that truth, and they don't like to hear us try to help them, and they feel like we're the ridiculous ones, and so it's ruining our relationships. But we keep trying and informing them, and I think that little by little, I think as the world is changing, it's going to help. We see little bits of difference, and I think the medical community hopefully is going to be catching up as well, that to hopefully try to prescribe more diet changes as opposed to medical interventions. There are 3 of us kids, and we are all really close together in age, 13 months apart, and just a single mom raising us. So it was all about convenience. And my mother, I love her, but her main goal is to make people happy, and to a fault, right? So the way that impacted us eating as kids is we had things that we liked. She appeased us with food. That's fast food, that's frozen foods, very little fresh food, and we had a choice not to eat the fresh food that was on our plate. So we weren't exposed to much. It was all animal protein, or lots of carbohydrates, rare processed foods. And it, like I said at the beginning, I feel like that has a lot to do with the health issues I had growing up, not being able to digest food regularly. It's really tough when you don't poop for days and days and days as a kid, and it was causing me pain. But as many times I went to the doctor, it was all pills and things trying to help you, and antibiotics to kill your gut bacteria and all that kind of stuff. And sure enough, when I was a teenager, I had really terrible issues mentally. I was depressed all the time. I flirted with suicidal thoughts often, as most people do at that age, or a lot of people do. I shouldn't say most people. And come to find out that most of the serotonin that your body uses is from your gut, and it needs healthy fibers and other things that you get from a plant-based diet that I wasn't getting as a kid. So I can't help but see them all linked now. And I've talked to my mom about it, and she said it was too easy for us to all be unhappy because of how stressful things were, not having enough money, not having a second parent in the house to help us, that one of the easiest things to do was to keep us happy was to give us the foods that we wanted, and they weren't healthy. I see very little difference between buying meat at the store and killing me, right? You're still killing it either way. One's just done more passively than the other ones. So when my mom finally met somebody when we were a little older, who's now my stepfather, and he's from very South Texas, and that's a hunting. They raised cattle to be sold at auctions. I used to go to auctions with them and sell cattle. It was just normal. I didn't think about suffering, right? They were commodities. They weren't people and beings like I see them now. But one of the last times I killed anything, it was a deer that had babies inside of it. You couldn't tell, a little cartilage. And I have a memory of that, of seeing that, and it affected me even at that point, even though I didn't see the qualities of humanity within these creatures. I still carry that around with me. So I make peace knowing that every day the choices I make keep suffering happening, but at the same time I hold on to that pain. I hold on to the feelings I have when I look back on that, because it's only encouraging me to keep going the way I'm going, right? I hold on to it to help me identify with other people that might be in that location, and maybe have some helpful suggestions that aren't criticisms, but some, again, fidelity to reason, some logical things. Oh, you have some ailments. Well, here are some things that might cause that and some solutions. Like, there's options out there, there's resources out there, and all of that. I feel like that connections that I can have with people are largely based upon the fact that I have that background. And that I hold on to it. Primarily what I've done, again, like I said, I don't have a big social media presence because trolling and the negativity out there with strangers is tough. I haven't, I haven't found a way to do that successfully. So what I do, which I don't feel like it's enough, one of my biggest regrets in life is that I haven't been more of an activist. But what I do on a daily basis is interact with lots of coworkers at work that I have relationships with. And again, try to suggest, I listen, family members as well listen, and sure enough, there's always ailments that people have, weight issues, or they're getting sick often. And I try to point out, you should look at what you're eating, right? Or that soda in your hand is poisonous to you, those kind of things. And doing it in a way that's coming from a place of compassion. Again, the biggest part of being vegan to me is radical compassion, extreme compassion, and hoping that something sticks. And so it's not on the street as much as I wish it was. But again, I do it in a way that I hope would be helpful, which is making connections with people I already have interpersonal communication with and connections with, and hoping that even a shift away from their current habits can help them, and therefore help all of us. It's happened a few times that I've made the connection to people who have seen. So we have animals on our campus, right? We've got chickens and ducks, and it's out kind of in nature, and sometimes the chickens lose a battle to a raccoon or an owl or something. It's unfortunate, but that's the way nature works, right? It's really sad, and there are kids and staff members who that affects them, because they have relationships with these animals we have. It's kinder through eighth, so lots of elementary kids, and so they get sad while they're eating chicken on their plate. They're crying about a chicken that died in front of them because they knew that animal. And so it's moments like that when I've as grieving's happening, and when it's appropriate, I'll try to remind them that they're creating that suffering also with their lifestyle choices, and suggesting, watching something like Earthlings, and some, oh, look at the fur that you're wearing. Like, let's talk about where that's coming from, and how that's produced, and try to kind of deflect some of the cognitive dissonance that's out there around people's lifestyle, that they're actively choosing to block their mind to something that they want to feel, obviously, right? So it has happened that somebody's made the case of, or come to me and saying, like, you're right, I didn't realize that eating egg caused a lot of death and suffering, right? That there is lots of baby chicks that die and suffer because I'm choosing to eat eggs that come out. It can be, but just like any lifestyle choice, it's dependent on how you approach it. I see food as being the cheapest health insurance on the market, and so I do spend more than average on my food. It's not eating out, but like I said, I eat lots of fresh veggies. We grow as much food as we can to try to help that bill, especially, and it helps me to also make sure that I know what I'm eating. The food on my plate is as local and healthy and fresh as possible, and it's a way to get lots of B vitamins when you're eating stuff that's got your garden dirt on it. But it can be expensive. Though it was expensive for us at first, because when we were first transitioning from being meat eaters to being plant-based, we ate a lot of processed foods because it's really easy to substitute sausage for tofurkey sausage or something like that. But that's also high in sodium, and that's also where a lot of your money goes. And so we try to scale it back by buying as much bulk as we can, and those sorts of things. So it is something I spend a lot of money on, probably more than a lot of other people might, maybe more than the average, but it's not too expensive, I wouldn't say. We're low income, and I have been my whole life. And so some of the things that we've always eaten that are very densely nutritious, but also inexpensive, is buying bulk, right? You buy bulk beans and legumes and rice and quinoa. All that stuff is incredibly affordable, especially if you're buying it in bulk and not paying for the packaging. And it's not that it doesn't take long to prepare it, right? You just throw it on the stove and you cook it for a few hours while you're doing other things. And what you get out of that is your complete amino acid profile, right? You get everything you need. I think that eating organic is the best way to go because you're eliminating a lot of other toxins from your body. But somebody else doesn't agree. You can buy cheap produce to throw in there. You're going to get proteins and vitamins and stuff from, and throwing some stuff in a big pot and making a big thing of soup, right? The kitchen sink soup where you just have everything in the fridge. That stuff is incredibly affordable, and it's very nutritious, and you get everything you need out of it. It's something that comes up often. As you know, the trope with veganism is where do you get your protein, right? And of course, we get it from the same place that your food gets it from, right? We all get our protein from the same place and our vitamins and nutrients from the same place. Like as Gary Yourofsky said, you're just not filtering it through the body of another animal. So when you point out those sorts of things, and again, stick with logic and don't get involved in some of the more people's more emotional ties with food, I think that you can hope to reach people that way. Again, it's something that a lot of people feel like they need meat for something, but you just point out there's nothing that you get in meat that you can't get from somewhere else in a more efficient form and a cheaper form. And it's not about supplements, and it's not about finding it outside of what you should already be eating. And that's the other thing, is that people feel like veganism is extreme, except you're already eating vegan food, right? Assuming that you have a side dish on your plate, assuming that you eat a salad with your steak dinner. It's already there. You just eliminate one and eat more of the other. And so it's a really simple transition that people can get past their own mental biases and their own brain block, and see that they're already there and that the logic is there. It just takes a lifestyle switch, and that's, I think, that's the hardest part, is getting people to change their habits. It feels wonderful. Physically, I feel great, but I do pride myself on living a way that's limiting suffering to myself, to other beings, and to the planet. It feels wonderful. I feel like I can look at my son and say, I'm doing the best for you. We're doing the best we can to help you have a safe place to live in the future. And people call us preachy vegans, but we are doing what everybody else wants to do, right? We are doing what we can to help the environment, and it feels great. And I do it every day with simple choices. I don't have to go out in the world and do something. It's just choosing not to do something. And it's so easy that it's honestly mind-boggling that it's so hard for some people to see that truth. The hardest thing about going vegan is at first changing your major habits, which is food, right? Food is how we've always centered our culture and our society around food. I feel like a culture identifier for most cultures is food, right? It's more so than language or anything else. That's how people identify with their peers and their groups around them. So changing that is really difficult. I think you have to accept that you're then going to stand in opposition to some people that you used to stand with, and that can be really tough. Again, with your family members, with your groups of friends, those sorts of things, the changes in your social life and your relationships, it's really tough. But you have to see the importance of it is more than you, right? Focusing on wanting to keep those versus switching to vegan diet is, again, a selfish way to live. And I think that being vegan and being unselfish in that sense is more important than friendships you may have, because it's one person versus billions of beings on the planet that are murdered and slaughtered every year. That planet itself that might not be here for our children. So once you come to terms with that kind of thing, which takes time, it takes a mental shift, it becomes easier. But that was my biggest struggle. We were very social before. As you grow up and get older and people start moving off, you lose some relationships. But we definitely had groups of friends that saw it as being very weird and extreme, and you don't get invited around as much. And like I said, you might get invited to dinner or to brunch, but choose not to go because there's nothing to eat for you there. And if there was, it's an environment you don't want to be in and a lifestyle you don't want to be a part of. But at the same time, there are so many people who are like-minded nowadays. If that's what you're looking for, if you're a social person, I think one of the benefits of social media these days is you can go find those people. We don't go out much, especially with a kid now, but we love what ATX Vegans is doing and how they'll do, all the events that they do and bring in kind of building community. I think that that's great, especially with Planted now. We've since become friends with the folks that are running Starlove Ranch out there, and the Holly and Davey, and so they're great. They took a cattle ranch and turned it into a sanctuary. Those cows now get to live their life without having to go to slaughter, and it was a family business that they convinced their family to change. And so we've found groups like that are making positive intent changes, and we're grabbing onto them as much as possible to help build that community and make it not such a weird thing for other people, and so they can see it as an attainable thing for them to do if they chose to, which they should, to change their vegan lifestyle as well. Why should you go vegan? You should go vegan because living on this planet, you are inevitably sharing it with lots of other beings, not only other humans, but billions of other animals. And to live a lifestyle where your primary focus is on yourself is not a healthy way to live. And that's healthy as in best for everybody. I know that it's tough to hear, but living a non-vegan lifestyle and being selfish is damning all of us, right? It's damning our planet and our environment. And if you have any hope that things can at least stay the same, if not get better, then you have to change what you're doing. You have to make changes because there's too much suffering out there in the world for us not to do anything about it. And you're actively contributing to the suffering of yourself, other beings, as well as future generations, including your own children, by your simple lifestyle choices based upon flavor of food and taste of food. And those sorts of things, living that selfishly is just not a sustainable way to live, and we're all suffering for it. So I think you just have to be as selfless as possible with everything you do for the benefit of all of us. We're social beings living closely together, and we've got to do what we need to do for the benefit of everybody, and that's living a vegan lifestyle.
Animal agriculture is the second largest contributor to human-made greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, water and air pollution, and biodiversity loss. Do you think one person can make a difference by going vegan?
Absolutely. In fact, I thought it was the number one. I thought animal agriculture trumped everything else. But if it's second cause, absolutely. When you see how much, if you look at the numbers, and it's some of the things that some of the documentaries like What the Health and Forks Over Knives and Cowspiracy have done is they've given data to everything, right? Really accessible data. And so one of the benefits of that is you can see what the cost of one hamburger is as far as water use goes, land use goes, and it's extreme. And one day of not buying that makes that difference, and it is something that's very tangible. And then you look at the trends when you step back more than a day over a year or a couple years, and you see how operations are scaling down because of demand, and we can see that we're making a difference. And you start putting numbers and commoditizing that, it's extreme, and so even if you would step back and see that you might not reverse something, the fact that our population is growing, and you can see that the deforestation is not keeping the same clip, it shows that we're making a big difference. And it's all people's individual choices. Going out to eat, and doing other family events always centered around food. I don't know if that's normal for everybody, but that's what we always did. And we, for a long time, as we were vegan, we would go along and just to be part of the group and not be so out there, because that's a tough way to live, is to stand in contrast, in opposition to somebody. But we actively don't go now to family events because they're going to be doing a crawfish boil, and I don't want to sit there watching somebody smash open the head of a creature, right? It's tragic. It makes me terribly sad and upset, and really I get pissed off at it because it's such unnecessary harm and resource depletion and people are doing it for the sake of fun. So we have stopped doing that, and one of the reasons why we took so long to have a kid was because of the state of things, right? Like, we knew we were trying to make a difference, but with the planet suffering and dying, we were worried about having a kid and bringing them into a world potentially they were going to be inundated with suffering a level that we couldn't understand. But what we realized is that it's up to us to create that kind of change. And the more people we have that are like-minded, can help with that. And it also helps us then counteract some of those changes, some of those things we've lost out on with socializing, because now we have a reason to do it with us and start new traditions. And so, Easter's tomorrow, right? And one of the things that my family always did was a big cookout. My mom, you bring the sides, I cook the meat, that kind of thing. And we don't do it. We don't participate. Getting a bunch of junk food and eating terribly around people it's not something that is celebratory to me, and I choose not to be part of that. So instead, we are starting new traditions where we are going to go out somewhere in beautiful weather tomorrow, go out to a park and picnic ourselves and do other things for ourselves and celebrate rejuvenation in spring instead of celebrating death, which is what you do with barbecue. We're celebrating life and go out and plant some plants, play in the garden, do that sorts of things. And so it's a daily way that we can all remind ourselves that we can create positive change as opposed to affecting change in a negative way is by doing it with little things. And at the same time, you can have fun and enjoy each other. And so those are the kind of things we're doing, and it's, we're all extremely happy. And so we're confident it's the right way to go until something changes. The angry misanthropic vegan, that's not something I consider myself to be. I think that that's clearly a label that's given to us by people that aren't us, and so you have to discount it right there. Somebody's perception of a lifestyle they don't agree with is it's not something that holds value, right? It's something that is very clearly an attack, and most people, as you know, reach out and they attack when they don't understand something, when something makes them feel scared and nervous. And so I try to eliminate labels. I do kind of take it in when other vegans are critical. When I try to see things on social media, and especially like these people who are not vegan anymore, and point out that you're not doing your best, and it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Our planet's dying. We're way past the point where we had flexibility in how we were handling our lifestyles. But doing your best is not too much to ask of anybody in everything that they do. It's something that we should always do, right? Why give something only partial effort if you can give it more? But to be criticized by other vegans because you're holding somebody to a high standard, that is tough. It doesn't make me angry. I don't get angry necessarily when I see people. If I said that before, I misspoke. What I do is get sad. It really does, and not misanthrope. I'm not kicking the dirt, but it's depressing to look around at the people that we live around, to the people that we rely on as part of our society, and see that they are making choices that are harmful to them. They're making choices that are harmful to other beings, and they're making choices that are harmful to the planet. And they're doing this with the information readily accessible to them. And that cognitive dissonance, that separation from logic is scary. And it makes me sad because I have to assume that they would apply that to all other aspects of life. And as somebody who has to share a world with these people, right, with everybody else, it's scary and it's sad. Like, first of all, you're harming yourself. And I care about you as a person, and you're doing something that's potentially going to shorten your life and cause that life that's shorter to be one of suffering. And that's really sad. Secondly, you're doing something for your taste that's causing the death of somebody who has all the same qualities that you have. You're just choosing to assume that they're not valuable and that they're a commodity versus a being, right? And those sorts of things, to see somebody living that lifestyle around you and to know that that's so common is depressing, and it's upsetting. And so if I get angry, it's because people I love are choosing to hurt themselves. People I love are potentially going to put everyone else around them that loves them into a state of mourning because they are choosing to do things that are harmful. And so that's where it affects me. When I see people at work that care about eating stuff that's clearly going to hurt them, I can't help but want to reach out and be like, what are you doing? Do something better for yourself, for your kids. All of you have kids. Do better. Be healthy for them so you can see your grandkids, meet your great-grandkids on a planet that's healthy, right? Like, we all have that obligation, and people are choosing not to do it for convenience sake, which again is a bullshit answer. I'm sorry, bullcrap answer, right? Or because it's just their norm and what they grow up with. And the answer, the solution to all these problems is right there in front of them. I have seen a few of those. My first guess is that most people who are making this change and saying, I'm no longer vegan, might not have ever been vegan in the first place, right? What we're seeing, and just like everybody's social media presence, is a cultivated form of themselves, right? And so to assume that they were actually as vegan as you and I might be I think could be very false. Secondly, like you said, a lot of those people lived some extreme way of eating, which counters all of the nutritional facts that we all know to be true and we all hold to be true, which is, eating a well-rounded diet that has carbohydrates, that has healthy fats, and fasting is good in short term. I fast 16 hours a day sometimes on a regular basis, but that's no more than that because I listen to my body, and if my body's telling me something, I listen to it. And so people who are doing water fast for 30 days or whatever, it's crazy. It's of course you're going to suffer. You're putting your body into shock if that's really what you're doing. But call me a cynic. I really don't believe that most of those people were vegan to begin with. And the way social media works, I feel like it's all about money, right? What I see is people who are on YouTube and have followers, all these vegan followers from being, whether it's 50,000, 100,000, million followers as a vegan. Now you decide I'm no longer vegan. What you're going to have as a result of that is you're going to keep most of your followers because they're your followers and they support you because you make connections by watching people's videos, and then you gain other followers because now you're this former vegan that's now vegan, and all that's doing is getting you more clicks and getting you more money in your bank. And I feel like that's what it's all about. I don't feel like anybody who's actually has been a legitimate vegan who knows that you can get everything you need health-wise from plant-based foods would then say, oh, actually I need to eat meat because I was suffering in this way, because those two things aren't logical. They don't line up. And again, if you stick to logic, you can see that there's some sort of fallacy here, and I think it all has to do with money. And so the first time I saw one of those videos, I made a stink about it because it was some lady on Instagram. I couldn't tell you her name, but I was like, this is bullshit, right? Like clearly there's something else here, and people were jumping to her defense. They need to do what's right for their family. Like no, because there's other people's families that are affected by it. How about the animals, right? Started this conversation, I realized that the way the algorithms work in social media, every time I would comment means that they're now going to be exposed to more people, and it's just giving them the popularity that they're clearly trying to get. And I feel like that's what it's all about. So as people have, on YouTube have started doing, I'm no longer vegan, it's like I stay clear away from that. You do your thing. Clearly we don't have anything in common. So I'm not going to click and do clickbait or like publish, your video and tag it on any Instagram or anything I might be a part of to get you more likes, because that's only going to support you, and you're only going to have more advertisers giving you more money for products, and it's all just a scam to me. Absolutely. I'm tempted every day. I I I loved dishes I ate. I didn't stop eating stuff because I didn't like the food, especially meat. I loved, fajitas and stuff like that. Growing up in South Texas, like that's the way we ate. And of course, I'm tempted all the time, but having a brain and having frontal cortex to process stuff, that's why I hold on to a lot of the stuff, like I said before, remembering what it felt like to kill an animal and when I used to hunt, and remembering opening my eyes. I don't stop watching slaughterhouse videos now. I don't need to. I'm a vegan. I don't need to. I know I'm not participating in that, but it's still happening and it's still real. And so anytime I would be tempted to, like, oh, there might be cheese in that, there might be dairy in something, and like I could probably eat it, no big deal. Somebody offers me something, I remember back, like, nope, like what did you just watch yesterday, Taylor? What did you see? And it's a reminder of the suffering that's involved in that milk that might be in that, or in that cheese that might be in that product, and it's not worth it. So again, you have to remind yourself it's not about taste. And so I do hold on to that stuff. I watched Gary Yourofsky's speech just this past week again because those clips that he put together that are just, so opening, and I cry every time I watch that stuff. I watch bits of Earthlings. I don't need to, but I cry, and it's because it's so personal, and it's so not personal at the same time that, I do that stuff just to keep myself and remind myself you're doing this for a reason, and I haven't reverted back, and I know I never will. Like as much as I can't predict the future, I can't see a scenario where I would ever eat meat, and I feel like I would gladly starve to death. I've never starved. I don't know what it would be like and what decisions I'd make, but I can't imagine eating another animal again, or causing suffering like that again.
Would you recommend that people subject themselves to traumatic, unpleasant videos so that they can really identify with what's happening?
I would. I think that if you're going to participate in something, you need to. It's your obligation to know what you're doing. I think that because there is so much suffering involved in so many choices, you don't have the right to close your eyes to it, and to close your heart to it, and close your mind to it. if you can watch the suffering you cause and still live that, that's your choice. But you don't get to cause suffering and be blind to it. Um, and again, it's something that we haven't talked about is the suffering that happens to other people based upon someone's choices. They do Chris, whatever his name is, that does the Cowspiracy and What the Health videos, that shows the fields in North Carolina and the asthma that it causes, all these people that have to live next to processing plants and who are affected by other people's choices, regardless of how they might eat. We have an obligation to these people to know their suffering. And it's basic social justice, whether it's a cow or whether it's a person, everybody has the right to live a healthy and prosperous life. And it's if I'm impacting that, it's my obligation to know how that is. And there's documentaries right there in front of you, easily accessible, free online, that you can watch to open your eyes to that. And if you don't, then you have to be aware that you're choosing to be blind to suffering and to murder, and you're part of a big, huge problem and a conspiracy, by lobbyist groups, by industry, that you're a I don't want to say sheep, that's not a vegan way to put it, but you're a cog in their machine. You're helping somebody make money, and you're being brainwashed for somebody else, not for yourself. I get that a lot too, right? Especially with I saw it triggered me even this week when somebody is talking about the plight of a mosque in Syria versus the church in Notre Dame that just shut down, right? And so, but the thing is, those people are asking you to have empathy for something, which is exactly what you're asking of other people, right? And so that I think that the barrier that people have, whether they're an animal eater, a meat eater, something like that, and they have that cognitive dissonance where they're not identifying the truth that's there in front of them, it's there even for vegans, or even for anybody, because what you're, if somebody were to come up to you, and again, all the time it happens on a daily basis if you look for it, if somebody says, sure, there's this, but what about this? Both those things can have valid attention given to them. Like, both those things can be deserving of justice. It doesn't mean just because you support one, you don't support the other. But if you're asking me to then give my attention to B when I'm giving it to A, then I'm going to be doing the same thing you're accusing me of now, which is not giving my energy to the plight of this over this. And you're asking me to make choices instead of encouraging us to do both. So the action then should be like, you're right, there is suffering there. So let's address that after we finish what we're doing, because we're addressing suffering now. And those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. They don't have to be separate. You can do both. And I think that that's something that's empathy, right? Basic empathy that we can all have for each other, is to support each other if it's a just and righteous cause. And if we're all doing that, then all of those issues get addressed. If we're all focused on empathy, then everything's going to get addressed. And it doesn't have to be one person's job to address everything. We can all address everything together as a community, like we're supposed to. Not that veganism is a religion, but it seems like that there's so many different outlets that have the same kind of compassion, nonviolence, that are supposed to be at the heart of what they're doing, that it's got to be the right way to go. And so I think that's not being a religious person, but you can count veganism as my religion and informing everything that I do, because there are countless good things that come of it, that it fills me up, and that's just it's something that I'm going to keep doing, hopefully. My wife is a big fan of like Ellen Fisher and what they do over there in Hawaii, raising, because they're raising their kids vegan and plant-based in a culture, and of course it's Hawaii, so it's beautiful stuff. So she does YouTube videos that are pretty spectacular and very high quality, and making a living and supporting her family by promoting veganism and a healthy vegan family. And so that's really great, because they eat a lot of high carb like we do too. So it's nice to see that it's successful other places. I like Dr. Campbell's, they do the China study, right? That book is a great resource for anybody. Dr. What's his name? Dr. Greger, who does nutritionfacts.org. I love him. I think that their bits that they do, especially on Instagram, are really nice and clean and healthy, and just right to the point, always positive. And it's something that's extremely accessible, which is, I think, the biggest part of it all. And I know that's where YouTube comes in. I just don't. It's not content that I follow. I wish Gary Yourofsky was more involved nowadays. He doesn't have a social media presence that I know of, which is great. But he's somebody who has such a good message, and his delivery so good that the greatest speech you'll ever hear, I think, is something that everybody should hear. And I often tell people, like, go find that, because that's what did it for me. He does such a good job of using logic and holding up a mirror to people that I don't doubt that people really react tough and troll him. I got trolled as me with a couple hundred friends on Facebook. I can't imagine somebody like him who stands up in front of people. But what I really respect about him is that, not only is his message very on point, he uses logic, he's got a great delivery, but as he says, unless I've missed something, he doesn't gain from it, right? His gain is what I'm saying that all of our gain should be, is that the hopes that we have create a better society and better culture for all beings and save the planet. He's like he says, I'm not selling books. There's no advertisers that are sponsoring this. It's just information. And if you take it, that's great. And if you don't, at least you heard it. At least you are having to actively make that choice as opposed to living in ignorance. And same thing with the China study. It's undeniable those facts are, and it's undeniable that we are living in a society that are inundated by special interest groups who are people trying to make money and telling us that this is the right way to live for reasons other than our health, or that it is a healthy way to live. And they influence the government telling us what we should eat, and it's all about making money for people. And so people who are pointing out those facts and pointing out those fallacies in life. I mean, I hope that they keep going and keep going strong. And the China study has lots of pages dedicated to that, is to back up the information that they're giving for the long-term studies that can't be done in the United States because of laws, right? Like we don't them, as well as Dr. Esselstyn. Yeah, Esselstyn. There you go. I always say it's wrong. And him and his son, right? They're Austin people, which is great. Or at least Rip, his son lives here in Austin, the firefighter. Yeah. But just like they all promote is that you are living in a culture that is supposed to prioritize health, and that's why you have such a big medical industry. But it's all for profit. And if it the fallacy and the illogical part about it is that there are things that are legally restrictive in practicing medicine, right? Like the vitamin therapies for cancers and stuff like that. It's illegal to try to do high dose vitamins to treat cancers in the United States. Why is that? What harm could it possibly do? There's no side effects that are greater than those drugs and medicines that are already being treated. They're using to treat cancer, but nobody's going to make money off of it, right? Not as much. And so it's very clearly that there's this cabal, we want to call it, or this background of special interest groups that run our country, and it's obvious. But pharmaceutical and medical industry, as well as meat, dairy, egg industry, all those people are benefiting from us eating their products, getting sick, prescribing medicine, eating their products, getting sick. And it's this cycle that you see, and it's dizzying and disgusting to see. But there are people out there who are fighting the wave and fighting censorship to get that information out there. And that's something. I mean, that's maybe a direction I can keep trying to push myself towards. The biggest thing that I think could help somebody either start going vegan or maintain a vegan lifestyle once they've switched is to keep listening to their heart, right? It's to keep in tune with themselves and to constantly remind themselves why they did something. Hopefully the reason why somebody's vegan or why they want to go vegan is because they don't want to participate in suffering. They don't want to participate in suffering of them, other beings, the planet, etc. And that needs to inform every choice and not just be part-time, but that's how you should live your entire life, every day, every minute of every day. And it's a tough thing to do, but we can all do it. None of us are dying from stress because we're vegan, right? All of us are thriving because we're vegan, because our hearts are lighter. And it's, if you understand the consequences of your choices and you focus on those, then you're going to make the right choice most of the time, if not all the time. And I know there's a lot of pushback to people who are, there's disagreements in the vegan community, which like it's okay to mess up sometimes, and people do make mistakes, but you have to understand that mistake just costs the life of somebody, right? And if you're okay with that, then maybe you're not vegan yet, and you still need some help going forward, which, it's the information's out there. I hope that, some of the sources that help me that I've mentioned help them. But at the same time, if you remember that tiny little slip up before you do it is going to cost the life of somebody. It's going to take a mother's child away from them. It's going to cause an animal to be raped. If you stay conscious of those things and you keep listening to what you know is right, then that's going to help you not make those slip ups and to keep you on the path that's going to help all of us. It's just to remember the suffering that's involved in our choices, how powerful we are, right? It's personal power that we all forget we have. And some people see it as the power to choose, but it's the power to enact change on a daily basis. And you just gotta focus that in the right direction. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to be interviewed, please visit the Vegan Agenda on Facebook. Look for the flying pigs.
We will be featuring more interesting and inspiring vegans, so be sure to like, subscribe, and click that bell for notifications. If you want to help us promote veganism, please support the Vegan Agenda on Patreon.
We would love to hear from you. Please comment below to let us know your thoughts.
Thanks for watching.